Welcome to SoundBreaker. In today's episode, we're talking to Josh Simmons, who is a groundbreaker in the music industry. Thanks for joining us. For our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do before we dive into it?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Bob.
My pleasure.
My name's Josh. I've been working in the music industry my entire life. I started, I suppose, probably what your listeners care about is where I started in music. So I actually was in film and TV a bit before that, but my music career really started with a band that I started in about 2009 called Buchanan. And Buchanan had a really good run in Australia. We sort of we got off to such a great lucky start in so many ways, doing festivals and playing with big bands and getting on the radio and doing TV and things like that. But then as soon as we went to try and replicate that success overseas, we kind of hit a few stumbling blocks and realized very quickly that it was all about the people or that lack thereof around you that can help make things happen. And that really inspired the Vampr idea, which is kind of what took me more into the tech world, but kept me very much rooted in the music industry, which is a platform, for those who don't know, that helps musicians and people in the music world connect and collaborate all over the world. So it was my frustrations after a successful run as the artist that sort of got me into the more business side of things. Since then, we grew Vampr to be the biggest platform of its kind in the world. And we ultimately sold it to a public company in Australia, which I now run, and that includes lots of other music services, including Jackster, which is a credits database, a metadata sort of resource for the industry, and an e-commerce platform called Vinyl.com. And together we sort of form this company called Vinyl Group.
Great. I mean, we're going to get into it. And that's part of all, what's the name? SongTrader, correct?
The SongTrader is our largest shareholder, but we are an independent company for all intents and purposes.
I see. Great. If you could, before I want to ask you to go back in time and how this whole thing, the love for music started. I mean, you said started with the band in 2009, but did it start in your childhood? If you can take us back, will be fantastic. Just to kind of let our listeners and viewers to see, hey, yes, if you have a dream, if you have passion for something, you stick to it long enough, it will happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's in my family's blood. My granddad was an original partner, in a publishing company called Leeds, which was bought subsequently by MCA and then Universal Pictures, and now it's Universal Music Publishing Group. So, and he stayed on as chairman of that company until the day he died. So it's been in our family's blood. And then my father was a publisher too, and he helped people like Paul McCartney put together their private publishing consortiums and things like that later in their career. So, and my mum worked at Warner. So it's just the whole life has been sort of very much
surrounded and being fed with all the knowledge. I mean, publishing is one of the hardest things to learn. And you started with publishing through your granddad, you said. Yes.
Yeah. And it made the major labels and publishers really hate me when I first went out as an artist because I knew too much.
You know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Great. I have to start by saying, congratulations, first of all, on being recognized in the TMN 30 Under 30 Music Industry Awards. Can you tell us more about this achievement and its significance in your career and journey?
It probably looks a bit rigged now because we just bought TMN about a month ago. But no, that was awarded 4 years ago, I think, thereabouts. I mean that was just recognition.
But that's still a great accomplishment. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm above 30 now, so I'm no longer eligible for any other 30 Under 30 awards. So I'll take the ones that I got. That was just, I suppose, recognition from industry peers, mainly in Australia, that what I was doing was making making waves and having an impact to the industry, and that was a real honor. That also happened during that first round of lockdowns in during COVID, so it was a nice little break from the chaos and all that scary stuff at the time.
Yes. So you acquired TMN about a month ago, you said.
Yeah, it's part of a company called the Bragg Media, which owns Rolling Stone Australia, or the licensed Rolling Stone Australia, Variety Australia, and then a
Yeah.
variety of other mastheads like Tone Deaf, Music Network, and so on and so forth. There's about 20 different titles there.
Wow. So you guys have multiple, should I say, sectors in the music industry that evolves, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Hmm,
yeah.
interesting.
We're trying to cover all bases. We talk a lot about a company that connects the dots from fans to industry professionals to creators, and how can we service each of those pockets. And I think the vision is hopefully becoming more obvious to folks as we make various moves. But the goal is to ultimately create a
So the
company
whole
that
thing is
makes.
to unite all of these bases by covering all the bases, unite all of these avenues or all these sectors together for the artist, obviously, to make things easier for artists. And
Well, no, to make it easier for all stakeholders. So stakeholders can be
yeah,
fans, stakeholders can be rights owners, anyone who sort of enjoys music and benefits from the music ecosystem is a
yeah.
stakeholder in our eyes.
Wow, great. Great. As the co-founder and CEO of Vampr, am I pronouncing it right? I don't want to say
You,
vampire without Vampr. Great.
you
A
nailed it.
platform with 1.3 million global users, social network. What inspired you to create a platform that connects musicians and creators globally?
Yeah, I think I touched on it at the start. It was
Yes.
born out of frustration for sure. We really did struggle when trying to replicate what was a successful project in one market to find a team in a different market. And when I looked around at technology at the time, I was thinking, well, damn, it's so easy to build a fan base. It's easy to, you know, make music. It's even easy to distribute it and potentially find a publisher online. It's all possible through technology, but it wasn't easy to build a network. So if you didn't
Yes.
know the right radio plugger, you didn't know the right managers, you didn't know the right, um, just folks that could help propel you in any given region, your alternative was to sit around in expensive cities like London, Los Angeles, New York, Berlin, Melbourne, Sydney, and network in person for years, and it just felt like a pretty outdated model when technology had solved so many other problems. So that
Hmm.
was the inspiration for Barry and I to go out and build Vampr.
Fantastic. Isn't it ironic how some of the greatest ideas born out of, or successful ideas out there, born out of, frustration because there
100%.
isn't anything kind of to help or to kind of replace that. And you're like, hey, why don't we do that? Why don't
Yeah,
we be the one who's going to break the barrier to make this happen?
100%.
Yes. Um, with Vampr's recent acquisition by Jackster, how do you see Vampr and Jackster coming together to impact the music industry, and what exciting development can we anticipate?
Well, Jaxter and Vampr tried to solve the same issue, which is how do we kind of connect the dots between the
Yeah.
professionals. Jaxter took a metadata approach, and
Uh huh.
Vampr took a social media approach. And I think what Vampr probably lacked, Jaxter had, and vice versa. What Jaxter lacked, Vampr had. So there was
Yeah.
very obvious product synergies, which is why the acquisition happened. To simplify it. Um, so that we've already started integrating the two products. You can already access credits on Vampr now. You can add your Jaxter metadata to your Vampr profile, and that integration will just become clearer and clearer as time goes on. It's totally conceivable over time that the two will become, one in some way. So that's kind of what we're working towards. That's what we call a product journey, and it takes some time, and you don't want to
Yeah.
alienate customers, and so that's a real it's also a brand journey too, to make sense of
Yes.
those two things. So I think ultimately, though, the music industry will benefit from a combined product, and that's what I'm passionate about building.
I mean, as you know, um, metadata is crucial, and it's been ignored for years in the
Yeah,
music industry, and it created a lot of problems. Now it became a bigger issue. So you guys tapping in on that and contributing to it is a major step.
yeah, and someone had to do it. Turns out
Yeah.
it's us.
Well, great, great. Um, you've taken the helm as a CEO, of Jackster, which you recently rebranded to Vinyl Group, or as Vinyl Group. The company is also home of Vinyl.com, which launched as an online record marketplace in 2023. Can you share your vision for the company's future and how vinyl.com fits into the this roadmap?
Yeah, that was kind of our response to the fan part of that ecosystem that I was talking about before. So
Hmm.
um, metadata can do a lot of things on the industry side. It can help, obviously, folks get paid, but what use does metadata have
Correct.
for the fan experience? And
Hmm.
if you think about records or CDs in the 60s to the 90s, fans got a lot of use out of sort of looking at liner notes, opening up booklets, seeing who contributed to what, and often would inspire them to go out and hunt for work from people. Like, let's say they
Yeah.
saw a producer time and time again. So I want to see more stuff from that producer. So we thought, how can metadata power a fan experience and a store? And that's really how vinyl.com was born.
Hmm.
So that's really, if we get it right, that's our gift to music fans, and it's also evolving like the other products. And over time, we'd like to expand beyond selling vinyl records to include all kinds of collectibles, physical, digital, or otherwise. Um, and so that's a work in progress, but it's off to a very strong start. Um, Sales really good. We're really happy with where it's going.
Hmm. um, you know we're going to touch on something that you're involved with heavily in the rapidly evolving music tech landscape. What trends and innovations do you believe will shape the industry's future, and how is Vinyl Group positioned to lead in this space?
There's a lot of M&A happening at the moment in music tech. Um,
Uh-huh.
Technology in general has had a really challenging couple of years, especially early
Yes.
stage companies that require consistent investment and aren't very liquid, which means that investors can't get their money out easily. And when times are tough, investors need access to liquidity. And so, what's happening at the moment is a lot of technology companies in general, but also music tech suffers from this too. Is companies are closing down prematurely, or they've run out of cash effectively, and so there's a lot of companies and talent out there at the moment, ripe for a group that has the resources and the deeper pockets, perhaps um, to snap them up and integrate them into something bigger. The funny thing is,
Hmm.
I think there's nothing funny about that. But the funny thing is, I don't. I still predicted that this decade would have seen a lot of M&A in the music tech space anyway, because quite a few sectors, whether it's self-service distribution platforms, um, self-service publishing platforms, mastering tools, sample tools. There's so many of these things out there now, and it's all a bit of a race to the bottom in terms of pricing. And I think
Hmm.
the customer experience can suffer as a result. And so, to me, just instinctively, M&A for the indie market was always going to be big this decade, and it's just panning out that way. We're sort of almost halfway through it now, and a lot of it's already taken place, and we've been a part of that narrative, and I think we'll continue to be.
You know, just your opinion on something that, as we're talking, how does all of this going to evolve the future of for independent artist distribution? Because all of this, paves the way for something new and different than what are we going through and experiencing. Your opinion
And
on this? or your
when you
vision,
look
you know?
when you look at independent,
Yeah.
when you look at recorded music and the share of independence,
Yes.
as part of that pie, it's just growing every year, and
Yes. Correct.
the major share of the pie is shrinking. So, what comes out of this, I don't know, but what I do know is that the independent side of the ecosystem is becoming a force upon itself, and that's I'm really excited about that because I made a living out of being an independent artist and supporting independent artists. That's what I'm all about, and I also believe in the power of people, and and en masse, and what can be accomplished when a large enough volume of people are all sort of working towards one thing. And so I find it all
So does
very
that mean,
interesting.
yes, does that mean social media platform will be and confirm to be the leading DSPs of the near future?
Well, I don't know that the major social platforms that we know and love today will necessarily
Yeah.
fit. I don't know that they'll fit that role. They might play a role.
TikTok, Reels, and all of that, Instagram and Instagram Reels, Facebook and all of this
Yeah,
matter.
I read a lot of discussion about those platforms. Yeah, fulfilling that role. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I'm not sure that they can from a quality standpoint. I think you need niche networks, and that's sort of why Vampr was created, and why it's a part of our
Yeah.
group, frankly. But I think they'll play a role in terms of volume. I don't think they'll play necessarily a role in discovery of quality. They
Mhm.
will. They will in some cases. Of course, new stars are discovered on those platforms all the time, but they often those new stars don't have staying power, partially because they were discovered on a generic social network. So I think we'll know the answer when it happens, right? And it's going to be an evolving thing. I know that's a bit vague, but it's very hard to predict how this all ultimately shakes
Would it
out.
be maybe something like, in film and TV, if you have a movie on Hulu, on Netflix, or Amazon, you cannot find it anywhere else. It's exclusively to them. Would it be the future of the music like this? If you want a certain artist, that you'll find them only, let's say, on Spotify, or this artist only available. Is that like will be set that way instead of having one song available everywhere? If you know what I mean.
Yeah, the funny thing is, in the film and TV space, those deals
Yeah.
are made. Yeah, those deals are made so that the companies investing in the artists can recoup, right? Or in the
Yeah.
films and the project. Music's often the other way around. You've got artists going, I'm going to make my music available only on Bandcamp because
Mm.
I get a better margin over there and I make more money than I do on Spotify. So
Mhm.
artists are a little bit different than film and TV because artists are all their own small business. Like every artist is a small business, whereas um,
Correct.
every film project is its own business. It's a little bit different. And I think artists have a bit more control than they realize in terms of deciding where they place their music as opposed to the other way around. What that could
Well,
ultimately look
independent
like.
artists, not the major label artists.
No, no, no,
Yes.
no. Yeah, that's right. That's right. What I think you might start to see is major artists start to use independent tools when they realize I can, you know, stop giving away 50% or 70% of my royalties and keep 90%, and I've already got an audience, so I don't need the major labels bank anymore to build my audience, and I don't need the marketing dollars because I achieve all of that on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see not a mass exodus, but an exodus of some meaningful size of established artists onto independent platforms. I think that's possible. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
To handle their own distribution and their own destiny.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. I guess we owe that big thank you to technology made this happen because the
Yeah,
technology and how it evolved and reshaped the whole music industry. You know,
hmm
um, the music industry is known for its setbacks and challenges. Can you share a difficult moment you faced in your career and how did you overcome it?
yeah. I think I probably touched on it a little earlier. I think knowing a little bit too much about the industry and being a little
You
bit,
mentioned that, yes.
yeah, and being a bit probably well, I don't actually. I never think there's a problem with being too ambitious, but I had very high hopes as a young artist, and um, And I think probably the challenges that I had was not appreciating how small the industry was, and that if you burn a couple of bridges very early on, that can follow you around like a shadow for a long, long time.
Hmm.
And so I think some of my challenges were ultimately lessons learned, to be kind to myself. But
Yeah.
that's what I would say. I mean, the other very practical challenge is my band broke at a time when CDs still mattered, and then by the time we got to our second album, all that mattered was streaming. And so I'd put together an amazing team who were specialists in getting CDs in the shelves at CD stores and how to move units. And that team, as much as I loved them as humans, and they're still some of my best friends to this day, they didn't have any of the skill sets required in a rapidly evolving industry. Thanks once again to technology. I shouldn't say thanks to it, actually really hurt my second album. But one thing that music has always had to contend with is
Yeah.
technology. And sometimes it's been a fractious relationship, but it's kind of funny that the two aren't in harmony, because any discussion about the history of music has to include a discussion about the history of technology, whether it's the recording process itself, the delivery mechanisms, from a fan perspective, how they listened to it. Was it a gramophone? Was it a mono setup? Was it a
Sure.
stereo setup? Was it a tape? Was it a vinyl? And so on and so forth. I mean, and then even through the streaming and pre-streaming with Napster and file sharing and stuff like that. So technology has gone hand in hand with the evolution of music itself. That I don't think you can talk about one without talking about the other.
Uh, Absolutely, absolutely correct. You're one of the few people kind of I had on the show, and they actually say that. Yes, yes. And I would say it's then you embrace AI. AI is the new thing now. You cannot
Mm.
just say music tech. You got to say music tech AI. That's the whole.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
we've actually got a whole week next week where everyone's like, it's a bit of an AI week. I won't go into too much detail, but we're looking at different
Oh.
ways to focus on, across all of the companies that we own. How can we use
Hmm.
AI to increase productivity, improve customer outcomes? And again, I can't go into too much detail, but
It's okay.
it's something that I'm very proud of. And for me, watching the sort of advent of generative AI has been the most exciting development possibly of my lifetime. I
Hmm.
can't think of another technology aside from maybe the smartphone that will fundamentally change everyday life for so many people.
Amazing. Great to hear. Great statement. This is great statement. Absolutely. Um, Not to go back for a second, just to get clear. So Song Trader only a major shareholder in the company, an
Yeah,
investor,
yeah.
shareholder, not an owner. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay,
Well, I
you
mean,
run the show. Yeah,
all shareholders are owners. To be fair to
yeah,
shareholders,
correct.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I
But there
mean,
are some
listen,
set.
Paul. I love Paul. Paul is a great guy, really great. Good relationship with Paul,
Yeah,
and I know how he envisioned things, and I sees when he gets involved, and and as you see all the bases that he's covering
yeah,
in the
yeah.
industry. Yeah, yeah,
I love Paul. I work with Paul on a basically daily basis at this point. Um,
yes,
and we sometimes, a lot of it's just a friendship at this point, but we'll bounce ideas off each
yes,
other, and
yes.
I
I
like
mean,
knowing
for
what
our
he's up
listeners, we're
to.
talking about Paul Wilshires because we just mentioned Paul, who's the owner and co-founder of Song Trader.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, he's great.
Um, yes, absolutely. In your opinion, what are some of the common misconception people have about the music industry?
That it's glamorous, that it's sexy, um, that it would solve all of your problems. And no, I think obviously so many kids leave school and go, I want to play in a band, and that's happened forever. That's literally happened. Well,
Yes.
not it's happened for the last 70 odd years, and that's a great thing, because I think joining bands and being a bit silly after 12 years of school is probably a rite of passage. But not everyone should be in the industry, just like not everyone should, um, you know, go into certain professions. So, without getting political, but
It's
so
okay.
Yeah. So music's like a bit the same. I think it's a very tough industry, and it is small. And like I said before, if you burn bridges, it can really make life pretty tricky for you. So it's a bit of a minefield, and you got to learn how to navigate your way around that minefield, and then try and make a living while navigating the minefield.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. This is
yeah,
one business. I tell you, you cannot. You better be careful burning any bridges because you never know. You
yeah.
never know
You
where
you end up
someone is.
you end up working for the guy that you pissed off 10 years ago.
Or you want to open an account with him, and he's
Yeah,
the main, the big honcho or the
exactly.
senior person in that company. Absolutely. As you know, collaboration is often a key element in the music industry or in the music world. Could you share a memorable collaboration story or someone you worked with who left an impact on you?
Yeah, when I first moved to LA, I got to work at Kanye West studio for a while,
Uh huh.
and he didn't personally go in very often at all, but because he had several of them. But it was part of his Good Music label, which I'm sure a lot of folks remember, and I got to witness firsthand what so many of us have read about in pieces about him, but watching all of these incredibly, in their own right, talented individuals placed in one building, going in, treating it like a day job, and just pumping out music day in, day out, day in, day out. And I got to be part of one of those big release cycles and it was a lot of fun, and it was a long time in the making. And that to me, the biggest lesson I actually took from that was watching what I now call horizontal networking. And it's this idea that a lot of these guys had known each other for 15, 20 years before they were famous. And
Hmm.
as some of their careers sort of rose and got bigger and bigger, a lot of these other folks were dragged along. And that's a good thing. Like that's what we should be investing in when we invest in relationships and in people. We should be investing in people that will drag you along if they have a win, and vice versa. If you have a win, you should drag along. And so you create these
Yes,
fruits. And
correct.
I watched that with my own eyes, and it really probably changed how I viewed the world a little bit and how I viewed um, priorities. Because I think before then I made a mistake a lot of people do, which is how can I get in touch with the most famous person in my Rolodex and then ask them to introduce
Yes,
me to them? And it doesn't work because the person that you're trying to get in touch with has no value from you, right? At least initially, you probably have nothing to offer to them of value.
yes.
And so it's a really inefficient way of wasting your time, and time's like the most important asset that we have. So I just that was just a very profound and impactful collaboration thing to be a part of, but also witness and just sit back and watch in awe and go, "This is cool."
It's funny you mentioned, you know, having this relationship and everything is based on relationships, and these people will drag you along with them, obviously to to more positive, eras and heights and standards. They always say it's the journey or the destination or the company. It's the company,
Yeah,
obviously, always the company.
yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Um, in your line of work, how do you stay updated with the latest trends, innovations, or changes in the music industry? And how important it is to continue to learn?
So it's 7:30 a.m. here in Melbourne, which is meant to be summer, but it looks more like winter outside just looking out the window. Um,
Yeah.
but before I joined you, I must
Yes.
have gotten up an hour and a half before then, and I did what I do every day, which is read all the industry trades, all the papers, um, all the newsletters that come through. And I don't read every article, but I'll skim enough to know what's going on any given day. And I used to wonder if that was a waste of time, but I actually think it's fundamental to the job. I need to know what's going on
Yes.
in the industry. I need to know why, and I need to assimilate that with my own intuition, and that's what makes me a good leader.
Fantastic. This is great to hear and great for our listeners. Very inspiring, I would say. So you have your knowledge buffet for your mind.
Yeah,
I love
that's a
that.
good way of putting it.
Yes,
Yeah,
amazing, amazing. Kudos to you, my friend.
thank you.
A lot of young and all type of people are going to be listening to our podcast and show, and they're going to be inspired by you and listening to how you started and your motivation, waking up early, feeding your mind, learning, never stop learning, being innovative, and all of that. When they're inspired, some of them say, "Hey, I want to take the same path." And what advice you have for some of the people who starting out in the business to kind of make their own path, who want to carve their own way in the music industry, in maybe not exactly the same thing, but in our industry? Any
Yeah, I think it.
advice, any tips? Especially there's a lot of gatekeeping in our business.
Yeah, there is, and but I also wouldn't lose sleep over that because can't control the things you can't control. What I would say is
Yes.
try and identify the value, your own value that you have to offer the industry, whether it might be as a songwriter, it might be on the administrative side, it might be like in the industry, whatever it is. I think it starts with identifying, oh, I'm pretty good at this one thing, and then here's the hack to success, whatever that means. But for most people, it means being able to make a living from doing the thing I love, right? The
Yes.
hack is very straightforward. Here it goes. It's time and game. That's all it is. If you find that you're good at being a publisher, for example, um, and you stick at it long enough, eventually you'll be running one of the big publishing companies. If you find that it's management and you're signing bands or acts constantly, lightning will eventually strike if you're persistent. So the key is very simple. It's just keep at it day in, day out, and you will make it because eventually you'll be a leader in the field. Time and game counts for way more than people give it credit, I think.
Hmm.
And
So keep
also
showing up.
keep
Keep
showing
showing
up. That's
up.
it. Just show up because a lot of people, 99% of people will drop out when it gets too hard and they'll pivot and they'll go and pursue a different career. And that's, I don't know how or why I knew that at such a young age, but I just instinctively understood that to win would just be to show up
My
and
friend,
never give up.
that's why you got the award.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
and,
why
and
you
and
got the
never give
award.
up.
It wasn't
Yeah,
for nothing. It wasn't
yeah,
for
that's
nothing.
right.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've been showing up. I've been showing up 7 days a week.
Yes.
365 days of the year since I was 17 years old and dropped out of school.
Those are variable insight, very valuable. And I'm sure our listeners are gonna find them extremely incredible and helpful. And before we wrap up, anything you want to promote, you want to talk about? I know you mentioned you guys working on some new AI stuff and other things. Any new acquisitions, whatever you want to promote, please
Yeah,
indulge us with all the stuff that you guys on the works, so our listeners could go and check it out. You know,
yeah. Look, as far as acquisitions go, like I said, we just closed on or closing, but we have announced a very large one in the Bragg Media and all of its mastheads, and that is very exciting. And these are brands that people probably already know, like I mentioned,
Mhm.
Rolling Stone, Variety, and so that's very cool. And so we definitely, I'd say to listeners, stay tuned for how we integrate that with our other properties and brands. It'll be an interesting couple of years, and that's definitely going to take a couple of years to fully realize. Um, so that's cool and that's exciting. And like I said, we'll be on the lookout for other things and opportunities too. But yeah, I mean, Vinyl Group is a pretty new concept and brand, but it comes from a legacy of high quality products that have come together to serve the music industry. And so we're here to support the industry, and we hope that the industry gives us some love back.
Well, I have to say, your investors must be extremely proud of you because they believe in your vision. Because you acquiring, it means that means it needs spending money. So a lot of investors, mostly, I mean, we know one of them, but there's others you would like to mention, or that's up in the, kind of
We've been quite vocal about one very supportive investor, a guy called Richard White, who also um,
Richard White.
invested invested in Song Trader too. But
Yeah.
he's a tech billionaire in Australia. He started out as the guitar repairman for AC/DC and the Angels,
Hmm.
and so he's always just had a profound love of music and technology. And so
Great.
he's a real champion of music tech entrepreneurs, and he's a big part of why I'm still in the job that I'm in. He's been a big backer of myself and Paul separately.
Yes.
But he's a notable shareholder. Our share registry is pretty tightly held at this point, which means that there's a lot of there's not actually so many investors, because there's a lot of people holding on to shares very tightly, and they won't
Yes.
let them go. And that's because we've been on a fast moving train, certainly for the last sort of 6 months since I came in and started changing things up a little bit.
So are you saying that we should get Richard White on the show? He's a big supporter of the music tech industry and a fan of a lot of the young entrepreneurs who are really pursuing and taking the music industry to new heights.
I think you should try.
Definitely. We need to get Richard White. We put that message out to the universe. Richard White, if you hear us.
I love it.
Well, I mean, this is a great show. All great things had to come to an end, but unfortunately, really, I'm enjoying this interview extremely. Well, firstly, thank you for joining us today. And this concludes today's episode of SoundBreaker. Please make sure to follow us on social and stay tuned to a new episode. And see you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
My pleasure. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the SoundBreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.